Now, we tend to call Dad for help on things like this, our dad here on the show, Nathan Dean, but I've got to tell you, he's the fleece vest was left at home. I feel more like it's brother Nathan today. Could we be brothers for today?
Sounds good.
Excellent. I'm flattered by that, of course. Now, Kaylee, this is the man we call when we get to Basel III Endgame, as you saw today. Where do we start with Mr. Nathan Dean here?
Well, I just wonder, Nathan, whether you think the needle really moved at all. Because as much as there was all of the talk, the bank CEOs having a platform, if you will, to say, we don't like this, please do something about this. The fact is, those senators in that room are not the ones that actually would be implementing the proposals. The regulators are. So are we left in any different of a place than we were before this hearing today,
So the whole point of the hearing from the bank perspective today was to put pressure on the Fed, and I think they did that. And they did that two ways. The first way, and we saw this with Jamie Dimon and with Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs' prepared remarks, they used words like cost-benefit analysis. When they are using cost-benefit analysis, they are telling the Fed, we better hope that you adhere to the Administrative Procedures Act, the APA. This is the law that requires that regulators must follow when they implement regulations. Because we don't think you've done the cost-benefit analysis, aka we may sue you after the finalization. And given today's Supreme Court, that lawsuit actually has some teeth to it. The other thing they did is they tried to persuade the moderate Democrats like Senator Tester and Senator Warner to continue to air their grievances or at least their concerns with the proposal, because the Fed is up against the ropes right now. They have to try and finalize a rule with changes to the point where they don't repropose it, so they don't trigger an APA violation. They have to get the moderate Democrats right, they have to get the progressive Democrats right, and they have to do it before the 2024 elections. So today was all about putting pressure on the Fed.
No regulators in the room. Wouldn't they be the ones to talk to you about this? Why should the banks have so much input?
Well, that wasn't the intent of the hearing. This was an oversight hearing the Senate Banking Committee holds on an annual basis. So Senator Sherrod Brown called this, and this is usually a way to, bash banks and try and push them into decisions like limiting overdraft fees. Bank of America CEO Brian Moynihan talked about that. But because the House Financial Services Committee didn't hold their version of this hearing, this gave the banks an opportunity to just air their grievances, a Festivus of sort, about the Basel III endgame. So it may have had a somewhat unintended effect from Sherrod Brown's perspective, because yes, you can bash the banks and you can see oversight, but at the same time, we're all watching, and we all watched, and I'm sure the Fed watched as well.
Did you just connect Basel III endgame to Festivus? This is
something only Dad could do.
Well, this is why Nathan comes in here. This is high level.
It's an art and a science, Joe.
It was a Festivus for the rest of us. There were no, however, feats of strength.
No.
But why not?
Well,
isn't that the authority that Congress brings to the table here?
Well,
it's time to flex. You've got all these guys in front of you here. Isn't that the point?
But it's also an election year. And legislation, we didn't hear much about legislation today. The one thing I would say is Elizabeth Warren, I think, did a very effective job in the crypto space on her crypto AML bill that she's been partnering up with a bunch of Republicans on, including Lindsey Graham. She was able to air her grievances about crypto and the connection between terrorism financing. She got the banks to agree that cryptocurrency should have the same amount of rigor as anti-money laundering, Bank Secrecy Act type systems that the banks fall under. So she got all the banks to agree to that. And she was also able to effectively, show her grievances to the colleagues so that when this bill comes for a vote, they're more familiar with the issue.
Yeah, I think it was pretty telling that Elizabeth Warren, who by and large often in these hearings is one of the most contentious with those testifying when it is big banks or regulators, knowing that she has very much opposed big banks getting any bigger. She has a lot of thoughts on this industry, and the fact that she went to crypto when she had the 8 GSIB CEOs, meaning the global systemically important banks, in the room with her, I thought was really interesting. Also, that Jamie Dimon and her seem to have an area in which they agree. He said if he was the government, he'd get rid of crypto entirely.
Yeah, this is one of those situations where, strange, alliances come together, but it's indicative of the challenges that the cryptocurrency industry is going to face next year. I mean,
and they're going to face them without Patrick McHenry and financial services.
That's what
exactly.
I mean, with you guys.
Patrick McHenry, I think with his announcement that he's not going to return, that ups the chances of a stablecoin bill coming in. I think he's going to really push for that stablecoin specific bill. But for this broader crypto framework that Coinbase and other companies are looking for, A, I don't think you're going to get it in 2024, and B, who's going to champion you in 2025?
Well, his name might be French Hill, right? We had him on the program last night. He is quite possibly going to be the next chair or ranking member, depending on what happens to the House majority. But he was adamant, and it's his job to say good things here and be upbeat. But he said stablecoin and crypto, broader crypto, will both be done before Chairman McHenry leaves the building. If not, though, Nathan, could he be the one to carry the mantle?
Yeah, absolutely. He could be the one to carry the mantle. My question to Representative Hill is how are you going to get it past Sherrod Brown? Because the House can do whatever it wants. It's a majority rule chamber. Then there's enough bipartisan support that I think both the stablecoin bill and the FIT, the Financial Innovation Technology Act that Chairman McHenry is pushing, can pass the House. Problem is how you get it past Sherrod Brown, because you have the Senate. And I think there are enough crypto skeptic lawmakers over on the Senate side. They're like, look, we just don't need to really do anything.
Well, can you get it past Maxine Waters? I mean, would she sign off on something that might make it more palatable for?
I don't think she has
Senate?
to. I mean, I think she'll sign off on a stablecoin bill.
Sure.
I don't think she needs to. I don't think she'll sign off on this broader crypto bill. But the ultimate thing here is you need Congress to pass this legislation, and I think eventually they could probably get there, maybe 2025. But in the interim, Chairman Gary Gensler is going to continue to bring enforcement cases, and the courts are going to begin to opine on them. Which side ultimately has the most leverage? We think the courts eventually will, but Congress still has to wait until they feel that pressure.
What a cycle.
Well, it's interesting to me that crypto legislation is something that could pass the House and not the Senate, and yet there's been legislation that's passed in the relevant committee, the Senate Banking Committee in the Senate, and there's been a little bit more hesitancy on the House side. That's safer banking when it comes to marijuana companies' access to the U.S. banking system, and that actually came up in the bank CEO's hearing today as well, and it didn't seem like they were super enthused. What was your read on that?
So, the question was, this was from Senator Warnock, was do you support the Safer Banking Act? And none of the CEOs really raised their hand. And from what our perspective is, we don't think that changes the needle all that much, because the big bank CEOs were never going to get involved in marijuana banking. As long as it's federally illegal, they are never going to do it, as opposed for concerns of AML and the Bank Secrecy Act. The revenue is just not worth the risk. And so when it comes to safer banking, it's those smaller banks and credit unions out there are the ones that are ultimately going to take that up. Now, we don't think safer banking is going to pass next year solely because of Speaker Johnson. I think it could eventually pass the Senate. It'll go to the House, but there's just too many folks over there that just aren't comfortable yet with the idea of integrating marijuana into our financial system. And so, again, that's going to be a 2025 issue. If you're in the marijuana equity space, you may not enjoy that all that much.
That's something else that just never seems to go away as a story. We're out of time, but there was a new letter from a number of governors to the president to see that rescheduling happens by the end of the year as promised. Is that forgotten?
We've heard rumors it could happen any weekday now.
Is that right?
We've heard rumors that it will happen months from now. So I've also heard rumors it may not happen before the election.
Great to have you.
Thank you.
Brother Nathan. I feel like that's like the way that sounds.